Hello friends, welcome to my channel. In today's video we are going to explain a mystery and horror movie called Pontypool. This movie is about a virus. This virus does not spread through blood or air, but through the language. In the beginning of the movie, a local radio station becomes the epicenter of a bizarre and horrifying outbreak. The film begins with a strange radio announcement about a missing cat named Honey, last seen on Thursday morning. The radio host gives an oddly unimportant backstory about how a local woman, Miss Colette Piscine, swerved her car to avoid hitting the cat. This seemingly trivial piece of information is followed by a rambling, unrelated commentary by the host, a clear indication that something is wrong with the way information is being delivered. The scene then shifts to Grant, the radio host of the local station in Pontypool, who is driving through heavy snow, arguing with his agent on the phone. His agent tells him he must stick to his current job, much to Grant's dismay, as he desperately wants to leave this small, seemingly godforsaken town. Enraged, Grant throws his cell phone into the passenger seat. When his phone rings again, he pulls over, about to take the call, but before he can, a strange woman appears out of nowhere. She starts hitting the passenger window, mumbling about blood before disappearing into the night. Grant is left shaken but soon brushes it off as he continues his journey to the station. Inside the radio station, Grant is greeted by his technical assistant, Laurel Ann, and they exchange pleasantries before he heads to the sound booth. He goes on air and introduces his producer, Sydney Breyer, and Laurel Ann to the audience. In an attempt to break the monotony of small-town life, Grant cracks jokes about the locals, poking fun at the town's issues, including a playful jab about Laurel Ann's military background. Sydney, however, gets increasingly frustrated with Grant's shock jock antics, telling him to reel it in. Grant refuses to take Sydney's advice, believing that he needs to shock the audience to build loyalty. Sydney warns him that such tactics will only alienate the listeners, but Grant brushes her off, continuing to make light of the town's serious matters. As the show progresses, Grant shares the story of the strange woman he saw on his way to work, wondering aloud if he should have called 911. Soon, Laurel Ann informs Sydney of an ongoing hostage situation at a nearby restaurant. The information is sparse, so Laurel Ann tries to tune into the local police's radio, but they can't get much. Sydney, not wanting to cause a panic, asks that Grant not be told, but Laurel Ann passes on the message to Grant's earpiece anyway. Grant cuts off his call-in segment and starts reporting on the hostage situation. Sydney insists it's probably just drunk officers due to the end of the ice fishing season, but Grant, ever the provocateur, makes a joke about the town's population being drunk all the time. As the story develops, Sydney tries to keep Grant focused on real news, but he continues to make light of the situation. Eventually, it's revealed that the hostage situation has been resolved with 2 unarmed suspects in custody. Sydney confronts Grant for his insensitive comments about the situation and the police. This leads to a heated argument between them, with Grant defending his approach while Sydney insists that the town needs serious, factual news. Grant's insistence on comedy causes tension, especially when he ridicules the station's field reporter, Ken, who is supposedly in a helicopter covering the story. In reality, Ken is sitting in his car on a hill, pretending to be in a helicopter, but Grant's mockery continues. The situation takes a darker turn when Ken reports a violent protest outside Dr. John Mendez's office. Hundreds of people are trying to cram inside, and things quickly spiral out of control. People are trampled and others are killed. Ken mentions that police, military vehicles, and helicopters are on the scene, but the line is cut off. The team at the station is unable to confirm any details as communication lines are cut, and Ken's whereabouts become unknown. This news intensifies the tension, but the station still can't confirm the riot. Meanwhile, a local man named Steve is put on air as an eyewitness, but the chaos on his end results in only static, and all subsequent calls from witnesses are cut off. The station is left with no official information but hears reports of dozens dead and many more injured. The confusion intensifies when a police officer named Constable Roseland calls in with a cryptic message about a strange incident at a local senior facility. People were chanting something about Hitler and a hurricane, and the situation seems to be escalating. This eerie message is abruptly cut off, leaving the team with no real answers. The radio station becomes the last place for updates as the BBC calls, seeking information, but they too are left with little more than vague details. As Grant continues to report on the growing chaos, Ken calls again, begging for help. He claims to be hiding in a grain silo, chased by people who appear to be cannibals. As the phone call continues, Ken becomes more frantic and his words grow increasingly nonsensical. Just as the situation worsens, the radio team starts realizing the terrifying truth. The virus is not spread through blood or air but through language. Dr. Mendez, a doctor who arrives at the station, explains that the virus is linguistic in nature. It spreads through words, specifically those understood in English. When a person hears a contaminated word, they become infected and are driven to repeat the word obsessively. As the infected person continues to hear and understand the word, they fall into a state of madness, ultimately becoming violent. The station team must now figure out how to stop the virus from infecting them. With the power going out and the situation spiraling further into madness, the radio station becomes a sanctuary of sorts. Dr. Mendez and the team try various tactics to avoid the infection, but Sydney starts repeating the word kill. In a desperate attempt to save her, Grant tries to confuse her by associating the word with kiss, disrupting the virus's control. Remarkably, it works. He realizes that by distorting the meaning of the infected words, they might be able to prevent the virus from spreading. In an act of desperation, Grant broadcasts one final message, urging listeners not to understand language in the traditional way. He starts connecting unrelated words in an attempt to confuse anyone who might be listening. As chaos erupts outside, the military starts making their presence felt, and the infected gather around the station. With the threat of being overwhelmed, Grant and Sydney make a last-ditch effort to escape. They encounter one final, horrifying obstacle, an infected person who attacks them. After a brutal fight, they manage to kill the attacker. The film culminates with an intense moment of uncertainty. The power goes out, and the Canadian national anthem begins to play on the radio, attracting the infected back to the station. The team, now desperate, locks themselves in the equipment room, and Dr. Mendez sacrifices himself by luring the infected away from the building. Hours later, Grant tries to reason with Sydney, who is now succumbing to the virus, by recontextualizing the meaning of words. In the final moments, Grant and Sydney share a kiss as the world outside continues to unravel. The radio station becomes the last bastion of communication in an increasingly broken world, and the film ends on a hauntingly ambiguous note. So friends, that's all for today's video. See you in the next video. If you like this video, then like and subscribe to my channel.